So this is the first playbook that has been released, and it's basically giving some regulations and rules about what the participants can or cannot do during the Olympic Games.
Can you give us some examples of what they can and can't do?
Yeah, so things like wearing a mask at all times unless they're sleeping or eating, or the social distancing, or the fact that participants cannot attend or cheer other participants, or the fact that during the competitions that you are only allowed to clap, but you are not allowed to cheer for the athletes.
How will such measures affect the experience not only of the athletes but the spectators as well?
I think that these rules and regulations that they have just announced will have a significant impact on the way that the games and the destination are experienced by athletes, officials, delegates, and even spectators if they decide to allow them. And I believe that the experience will be quite different, will be contrived, and in the end, some of the atmosphere will be lost.
Well, of course, safety is the #1 issue here. Melbourne's hosting the Australian Open tennis, perhaps one of the first major events being held when the pandemic has such a grip on so many countries around the world right now. What can Japan learn from perhaps Australia's experience?
Obviously, the Australian Open is nowhere the size or the complexity of the Olympic Games. Nevertheless, you may see it as a bit of a dress rehearsal, and we are seeing consistently what can go wrong, and the Australian Open hasn't even started yet. And this is in a country that is coping quite well with COVID, and unfortunately that's not the case in Japan at the moment.
Well, as you say, the Olympics will be held on a much bigger scale across various locations and involve a lot more people. Is it really feasible given the state of the pandemic we're in at the moment, do you think?
I think it's an awfully ambitious to put one of the world's largest events in the current circumstances. I think there are a number of considerations, and the top consideration has to be the well-being and the safety of the local population.
So, Margarida, of course, we don't know how much worse the spread of coronavirus will be come July. How are Japanese officials even planning for such an event?
The Japanese authorities are obviously consulting with a number of relevant stakeholders like the International Olympic Committee and the World Health Organization in order to ensure that they'll be able to maintain the safety and the well-being of all the stakeholders that take part in the Olympic Games.
And at what point might officials consider cancelling or postponing the event yet again? What are some of the considerations leading up to the event?
There are a number of considerations here. I think, as I mentioned before, the top consideration has to be the well-being of the local population. And if the decision of whether or not that can come second to the potential economic benefits of hosting the Games. Obviously, from a financial perspective, a huge investment has been made in infrastructure in order to host the Games, and the Japanese government would obviously like a return on it. There's also the fact that the Olympic Games are a good opportunity to showcase what Japan has to offer on the international stage. It's a matter of pride, and that opportunity may be lost if the Games are cancelled. At the same time, it's very important to understand how to ensure the safety of everyone involved, how effective these regulations and rules will be, and how to manage the uncertainty around how the situation will evolve in the next 6 months. And of course, a really important consideration has to be the support of the local community, which is fundamental for hosting an event such as this one. And it seems that at this point, that nearly 80% of the Japanese population thinks that the Games should be postponed or cancelled.
Indeed, the officials really do have to gain the trust of those living in Japan. How authorities and the IOC communicate the risk of holding the Olympics is really important, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think the issue around risk perception, so the way we perceive risk, and the risk propensity, so our individual ability to, our willingness to accept or reject risks in general plays a big role. And in particular with these rules that have been released, I think they're hardly foolproof because they depend on self-regulation. And we've seen a lot of examples from around the world where that hasn't worked out so well.
Margarida Abreu Novais, thank you so much for your insights tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.